Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kathy Kogan, and I'm the director of the National Interpreter Education Center located at Northeastern University in Boston. And I'm delighted to moderate today's webinar titled The Importance of Deaf Self-Advocacy, New Second Edition Overview, presented by my dear colleague and friend, Lillian Garcia-Peterkin. And while today's webinar is co-sponsored by the National Interpreter Education Center and the Regional Interpreter Education Center at Northeastern University, the NURIEC, the Deaf Self-Advocacy Curriculum Toolkit is the culmination of 7 years of work of the National Consortium of Interpreter Education Centers. The project was conceived and guided by Pauline Anarino of the Western Region Interpreter Education Center. All of the National Consortium Centers are proud to have been involved in important ways in the development and dissemination of these materials. Before we begin today, I'd like to take care of a few housekeeping details. This presentation will be in ASL and English. Interpreter is providing an ASL interpretation of my remarks right now, and Lillian will present in ASL, and the interpreters will provide an English interpretation. The video display in the upper left-hand corner of your screen can be closed if you wish, or it can be detached by clicking on the frame and dragging the window toward the center of the screen. It can then be expanded depending on your individual or group needs. To access closed captioning, please click on the closed captioning icon located above the video display. You may also access the control by going to Window in the toolbar and then click on Closed Caption. For low vision participants, the captions can be enlarged to a 32 font size. If you have questions during the webinar, please go ahead and type them into the chat function. We'll collect questions throughout, and during the last 10 minutes of Lillian's presentation, we'll address your questions. And then after questions and answers, we'll provide contact information to facilitate your follow-up later on. There are several items of interest under the resource links on the NCRTM page where you access the webinar. A copy of the PowerPoint is available at the bottom of the webinar access page, so if you feel the slides are going by quickly, feel free to download the PowerPoint at any time. A transcript of the entire presentation will also be available following the webinar. This webinar will also be archived for future viewing within the next couple of days after the webinar, and you can find that also in resource links. It's called Session Recording. At the end of the webinar, we'll ask you to participate in our evaluation, and the questionnaire will open automatically. We very much appreciate your feedback, and you can feel confident that the responses you give will not be associated with your identity. At the end of the evaluation, after you fill that out, another page will appear with instructions on how to apply for continuing education credits and verification of attendance. Now I'd like to ask if you are viewing in a group with a member of the group who signed in, please type into the chat box the number of people viewing with you or your organization, and this way we can get a better sense of our reach today. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Lillian Garcia-Peterkin. Lillian has been instrumental in the development of the new DSAT curriculum toolkit and in the training of master trainers who bring the curriculum out to deaf consumers in each region of the country. As Communication and Outreach Coordinator for the National Interpreter Education Center, Lillian is involved with virtually all of our consortium initiatives while working to facilitate both internal and external communication for the consortium centers. It's my great pleasure to work with her every day. Lillian?
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. You can proceed to the first slide. The National Consortium of Interpreter Education Centers is funded under the Rehabilitation Services Administration. We are working with training interpreters for individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, and or deafblind. And if you look at the map on the next slide, I'll give you a minute to peruse that. You can see the various regions that the NCIEC is broken down into. Again, the NCIEC is the National Consortium of Interpreter Education Centers. There are 6 centers functioning under that umbrella. Kathy Kogan, who just introduced me, mentioned Pauline Anarino. She led this particular effort in the development of the Deaf Self-Advocacy Training, and she works in the Western Regional Interpreter Education Center. Our national center, you'll see at the top right portion of the map, that's under Northeastern University, and there are 5 centers that work together with the National Center on a variety of projects. But today we're specifically focusing on the Deaf Self-Advocacy Training, also known as DSAT. This training has gone through a number of iterations. As Kathy mentioned, there have been many changes over the 2 grant cycles. The initial cycle was from 2005 to 2010, and now we're in the second cycle from 2010 to 2015. So we're partway through this second cycle and have been continuing the efforts with DSAT. You'll notice that your PowerPoint shows you various phases of the project. Initially, we were working on data collection. The second phase focused on development of the curricula. Phase 3 was actually disseminating the training and field testing it to make appropriate adjustments. And then as we received feedback, we moved into phase 4. And I'm going to talk more in depth about that particular phase as we move through this presentation. But we wanted you to have a sense of what the process has looked like thus far. I'll give you a moment to read over this side. This is phase 1, data collection. Subcontract with Communication Services for the Deaf, CSD, and create a WOU to conduct a study of current and best practices in the area of deaf advocacy training. What they did was an extensive literature review, focus groups with 35 deaf consumers, a survey of 2,050 deaf consumers, a survey of 180 rehabilitation counselors, and interviews with 12 deaf leaders. So this slide describes phase 1. We contracted with CSD and Western Oregon University to focus on survey RCDs, survey consumers, and again 12 deaf leaders from the community. So we reached out to these folks to collect data. And as we received the data, we realized the real value of face-to-face interactions, whether that was individually or in a group. Online and telephone and video phone meetings, trainings were determined not to be as effective as face-to-face meetings. So we contacted a number of human services agencies, independent living centers, and went ahead and provided meetings in those locations. So our data collection resulted in the publication of the book that you see here on your screen. These are our findings from phase 1, and it is entitled, or you can find these at the website www.deafselfadvocacy.org. If you click on that link, it will automatically take you to this website. And this is information that you can feel free to copy at will. And it has information about our curriculum specifically, but also more general practical information for deaf folks to read. There's some very rich resources available there. One of the things that we discovered in the data collection phase was the highly valued connection of deaf-to-deaf or peer-led trainings. Now the interpreter will read the slide. The peer training philosophy, quote, of, by, and for the deaf, hard of hearing, and deaf-blind, unquote, philosophy. The NCIEC Deaf Self-Advocacy Training Initiative promulgates an of, by, and for the deaf, hard of hearing, and/or deaf-blind philosophy in all aspects of its programming. The DSAT curriculum was developed by individuals who are deaf, hard of hearing, or deaf-blind, and designed as a peer-led training. We really wanted to emphasize repeatedly this peer connection, because what we discovered was that consumers and other deaf folks were much more willing to express their genuine experiences, their frustrations in the world to other deaf people. Oftentimes, as deaf folks, we are reluctant to share those kind of experiences, and we then lose the opportunity to learn from them. So because of this interactive approach where we would share ideas, where we would discuss creative problem solving, where we would analyze one another's attitudes together as peers, we found to be a much more effective approach. The next slide is about phase 2 and the development of curricula. Now, if we look at the next slide, you'll see a picture of the original publication, and now the interpreter will read that slide. It says, first, curriculum. This phase was conducted through a contract with a deaf curriculum specialist, PS Writing, and incorporated the information gleaned during phase 1. This CD and DVD set is no longer available. So the original curriculum is shown on your screen. This is no longer being disseminated. I'm sure some of you have that one, and it's fine if you continue to use that, but we will not be reproducing any more copies of that particular curriculum. That was intended to be a pilot curriculum so that we had a structure to start with to gain feedback from people who used it and then make changes to the second edition. The next slide is phase 3, field testing through training. This is when we actually created and published the curriculum and then disseminated it for people to use. You will see a picture on the next slide of our the trainer session in Denver. These are the participants from the Denver training, and if you'll notice the two people in the middle, I'm pictured there, as well as Alberto Cifuentes, who is another member of our staff and works with us on providing these trainings. So there were a wide variety of people that participated in these trainings, from professionals to consumers. You may recognize some people from your area in that particular photo. This is a picture of the participants in the Washington, D.C. training. This particularly focused on folks from the east and the southeast parts of the country. I want to particularly acknowledge the CEO of NAD, Howie Rosenblum. He's actually the executive director of NAD, and he was involved in this particular training. We were particularly happy to have him there with us. So for phase 3, again, this was the field testing phase. We were looking at how effective the curriculum was. Take a moment to read over that slide. The interpreter will read this slide now. Phase 3, field testing. To determine initial effectiveness, the curriculum was reviewed by 30 content experts throughout the United States. Data was collected from tests provided before and after the training and from participant evaluations. This data was used as the foundation for the second edition of the curriculum. Training was provided to more than 600 deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals. So 30 people in the initial round were trained and went out to start using the curriculum. We didn't initially have activities already included in the curriculum. Those were added later, as well as pre- and post-tests that were there to measure and assess the effectiveness of consumers' learning and the application of the information. So pre- and post-tests were used to validate the effectiveness of the overall curriculum. Again, we provided training to over 600 participants and worked with over 30 trainers as well. So the 30 trainers provided training to over 600 participants across the country. Slide says Phase 4, Revision and Second Edition. As I was mentioning, we are in Phase 3. Again, from the 30 trainers that were initially educated in this particular curriculum, we chose a number, 12 finally, who decided to commit and become trainers. They worked with us on editing the curriculum and making the changes based on the feedback that we'd received during the previous phase. Here's a photo of the master trainers. These are the 12 folks who eventually committed to becoming trainers. They were chosen from a number of people who had taken 3 or 5 iterations of the training. They've become familiar with. They provided multiple trainings. These 12 people provided multiple trainings and created a number. We have created a number of additional activities for the second edition of the curriculum. These are people who have become experienced with those as well. The interpreters are just changing. Please bear with us a moment.
The group of master trainers became our advisors, informing us about what worked and didn't work with DSAT. They were experienced at training other people to become trainers. They continued to provide consumer trainings as well. Their contact information is available on our website. I'll ask the interpreter to read this slide to you. DSAT Master Trainers are advisors to the DSAT project, qualified to provide train-the-trainer workshops throughout the country, and available to provide consumer trainings throughout the country. Their contact information is available at www.deafselfadvocacy.org. And now we have a new title for the second edition of our curriculum, as you can see here, Deaf Self-Advocacy Training Curriculum Toolkit, second edition, published in 2012. You'll also notice that we have a new color. We've gone from maroon and gray to a beautiful deep blue color, so that the difference is immediately recognizable between the first edition and the second. So if you see maroon, it's the first edition. If you see blue, you know you've got a copy of the second edition. That's to aid in your recognition to know which edition you might have your hands on. I think I'll have the interpreter read through this slide first. It says, Revision and Edition. English Wit Solutions, a deaf-owned technical marketing and writing service, developed the second edition of this curriculum. This enhanced edition has been repackaged as a curriculum toolkit. It
contains a new module that discusses interpreting services delivered via video conferencing technology, upgrades to existing modules, new tools for instructors, and new advocacy vignettes. If you recall the development of the initial curriculum that we talked about, it was done, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the person who worked on it. It was done by an agency called TS Writing, a deaf-owned company. The second edition, again, we used another deaf-owned company called English Wit Solutions. This company was very helpful in editing and drafting the text of this edition. With this curriculum, we added a new module that talks about VRS and VRI interpreting. That was not in the first edition. Also, we've done some renovation. We've made some changes if we've noticed typos or things that weren't stated clearly or were not effectively worded. We changed those as well. We included new activities for which I have to thank DARs in Texas for coming up with some wonderful activities with games, which were a real addition. And also our trainers, based on their experiences working with consumers in their own training experiences, offered a lot of wonderful suggestions. Consumers are able to select from the kinds of activities that they like, and you can pick the activities that will work best based on the group that you're currently working with in your training. There are some, we noticed that some of the videos we distributed weren't working, so we replaced those with ones that do in fact work. And one of the newer modules, as I said, is the VRS VRI module that we're including. Now, once you've got the curriculum in hand, how do you make it work? One thing to think about is the format. Also, the teaching environment. So if you've got the curriculum materials, some people are concerned about the English perhaps being too advanced, but you should know that we have gone over our PowerPoints, and it's important for the trainers to think about the age of the participants, the education level of the participants, their life experience, their real-world experience. Are they students in transition from high school? Are they adults? Are they human services professionals or those receiving those services? One must choose what's in the curriculum and match the audience that it's being taught to. The trainers are the ones who would make that decision. And again, I want to emphasize that trainings need to be provided to deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind people by those who are themselves deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind. Who knows better about self-advocacy than those people who are doing it for themselves? The target audience, as we said before, students in transition. When we were developing this curriculum, we were keeping in mind students in transition as an important target audience, people who are about to graduate from high school and enter the world. Are they job ready? Will they be attending college or other trade schools? Do they know how to request interpreting services and communicate effectively to get what they need? And this training could help them become successful self-advocates to make sure that their needs are met and that they have full communication access. Terminology. We improved our description of the vocabulary terms that we've used within the modules that we came up with. And again, our primary focus for this was on the group of individuals that we intend to train. We noticed in one of the trainings that half of the participants were deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind consumers, and the other half were people who work for human services agencies that provide services to deaf and hard of hearing people. We wanted to make sure that our curriculum would be effective with these different groups. And in fact, it was extremely successful. Consumers were able to help the service providers, and service providers were able to help the consumers to both benefit even more from the curriculum. The activities, the role plays that were included, all were very beneficial. And you'll see that with the diversity of these options in the new curriculum. For high school seniors, is a completely different approach required. It requires a different amount of time. It may require a weekly meeting for an hour or two each week per module, and you might want to stretch the time over a 7 or 8 week time period to have them attend regularly. That may work better for that particular age group. Language access to the content of the curriculum is important to keep in mind. Something else that we added to the new edition is an overview that describes the content of each module, so that when you come across Module 1, Module 2, it's not just a number or a title, but an actual description of what to expect. We also have a brief overview of each module that would benefit people who might think that they're interested in a DSAT training. People who may have a limited amount of time and not be able to go through the entire 7-module training could select from the list and choose those modules that are most applicable to their current needs. You could schedule a training that would be 1 or 2 full days. You could space it out over a different amount of time and break it down into an hourly treatment of each module, depending on what's most effective for the group you're working with. The second edition of DSAT, I wouldn't say that it's tremendously different, radically changed, but it's recognizably different. We have made some valuable additions. We now have 4 CDs that we send with the curriculum. It looks lovely, doesn't it? These 4 discs I will talk more about in a bit. We also have a glossary, so that at the end of each module, we provide worksheets with questions and answers that are especially good for students in transition to think about when they're at home, or to help people do a quick review of the information. The terminology used in the first edition was only in printed English, and now it's also available in American Sign Language. The pre and post tests that we use for the knowledge check before and after the trainings are also available in ASL. Some people didn't feel comfortable addressing the test questions in written English. Now we have an ASL version that people can watch and respond to. I know that people may wonder what is so important about the pre and post tests, but it's important for us to have evidence so that we can verify that actual learning has occurred as a result of the material presented in these trainings. This helps us gather the evidence that we need to show that people are benefiting. We also have suggested activities. For example, in Module 2, which is focused on self-determination and self-esteem. We took some time to think about activities that would be beneficial to this module. And again, it depends on the group that you're working with. For example, a group of seniors in high school. You could try lecturing them about self-esteem, and chances are it won't do any good. But rather than that, if you give them a piece of foam and something that's stickies that can attach to it. So you make it into a craft project, something that is hands-on, and you ask this group of students, pick one word, just one word, that describes how you feel about yourself. What's inspirational about you? So you hand these craft materials out to the students, and you have them work with their foam, and maybe they'll make flowers or landscapes or whatever. Give them 20 minutes to work on this project, and then ask each student to go around and say, why did you pick this word to describe you? What does this say about you? And it's just inspiring for them. You know, some of them would say, my mother is my role model. She helped me get through school. Someone else might say, I have these wonderful accomplishments. I wasn't able to do this particular thing before, and now I can, so that they share their experiences in a positive, empowering way. That's one possible activity that would be effective with that age group. An activity that might be effective with adults would be to have an outline drawing of a person's body on a piece of paper. You can trace the person's body as a silhouette on a large piece of flip chart paper or something, and then ask people to then add words to that, something positive. Fill that silhouette drawing with these words. Have I disappeared? Am I still there? Sorry, my screen went dark. And as I said, add words to that, and then say, what is the definition of a good person? People might be wondering why they were asked to perform this activity, and then at the end, the leader can say, look at all these qualities that you embody. You are a good person. Remember, you're talking about this other good person. Now look at yourself. You, in fact, are a good person and should feel good about that. If you were able to come up with these words, that means these good things came from inside of you and your life and your personality. That was something that was very important to building self-esteem. Module 3 is a little bit heavy. Sometimes people do feel oppressed and that they've been struggling and looked down upon and had a difficult time in their life because they've always been told no and made to feel less than, but we need to find a way to turn that around so people can develop self-esteem and become good advocates for themselves. That's the content in Module 3, which is fairly heavy. And again, I think that especially is applicable to high school students in transition. They really benefit from this kind of work on self-esteem. My point is that each module offers a variety of creative activities that can be applied. We used to have 8 modules in the first edition of the curriculum, but now we've combined the first and second modules to become one. It was, rather than the basics of advocacy and then self-advocacy, we combined it into one module on advocacy. We had module 7 and 8 before. 1 was on preparedness and 8 was on resources. We've combined those as well. And I will show you a list of all of the modules in an upcoming slide. And Module 5 is our new addition to this curriculum, and this is about VRS and VRI. People might be curious why we thought this was an important topic to include in the training. I will address that in a few moments. Each module in this curriculum toolkit has an overview with a tab at the top. Before, people were having to page through large amounts of text trying to find which module they wanted to work with, and now we have tabs that are easily located and help you deal with the module that you want. Each module begins with an overview. It explains how much time they recommend to devote to teaching each of these modules. It provides additional explanations, the goals and purposes, the objectives of the particular module is all included in the overview, which is very helpful. The DVD, the vignettes that are shown about good and not so good advocacy are listed there. It's helpful to see these samples. If you don't do it well, you don't get what you want, and if you advocate successfully, you have a better chance of doing that. Role plays are included, and other interactive activities. All of these are listed at the beginning of the module so that you know what's there to work with. There are worksheets included. We did have those in the first edition, and we also have them. We've kept those, but we've added them in ASL, both the worksheets themselves as well as the glossary of terms. I'll take a minute to read the titles of the modules. The new module titles are Module 1, Advocating for Yourself and Others. Module 2, Self-Esteem and Self-Determination. Module 3, Working with Interpreters. Module 4, Ethics of Working with Interpreters. Module 5, Interpreting Services Using Video Technology. Module 6, Preparing for Self-Advocacy. Module 7, Utilizing Resources for Action. If you remember, we talked earlier about two separate modules being combined to form the new first module. We talk in this new module 1 what advocacy is about. What does it mean? For example, the deaf president now. And then how to apply that idea of broad advocacy in a group to your own personal advocacy. The second module talks about self-esteem. That was module 3 in the initial curriculum. Now it's become module 2 because of the combining of modules 1 and 2 in the new curriculum. Self-determination is very important, and again, it depends which group you're working with. In some groups, it may not be as important a topic. In others, a lot more work is going to have to be devoted to this subject to help people develop the appropriate self-esteem that they need. The next module is working with interpreters. What does it look like to work with an interpreter? What kind of training is provided? What do the different kinds of certificates mean that interpreters may or may not have? The fourth module talks about role and ethics. It shows a copy of the Code of Professional Conduct of the National Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf. For students, especially seniors in high school, they've probably never heard of the Code of Professional Conduct for interpreters. It's important, but before you would show that to them, the 7 tenets of that code, you'd want to wait and ask, what kind of terrible experiences have you had with interpreters where things have gone wrong? And generally you get lots of examples. You can make a list of those and display them of what the students came up with. Some students will say, oh, my interpreter showed up in a paisley jacket and neon stripes, or with, you know, long sparkly fingernails or overdone jewelry. You'll get all kinds of examples of inappropriate behavior, of bad attitude, of inappropriate treatment, of sloppy signing. And the students universally say they don't want a bad, lousy, terrible interpreter. But if we ask for specific examples about what they've seen that's wrong, and then show the Code of Professional Conduct and see where interpreters have been doing things that are in direct violation of that code, I think that's an important activity and a good demonstration for the students. It helps them understand that, in fact, interpreters do have rules, whether you call them guidelines or rules. They do exist. I'm not sure if the Code of Professional Conduct counts as rules or guidelines, but whatever. There are guidelines or rules or a code that interpreters are expected to follow in their professional life. So when students talk about interpreters, or when anyone talks about interpreters, often the term qualified comes up. What does that mean? The Americans with Disabilities Act calls for qualified interpreters, but doesn't necessarily define it. So how, as a deaf person, do you talk with your doctor or a job interviewer or other professional person that you have to work with about what it means to have a good interpreter? Sometimes hearing people in positions of power will try to make deaf people jump through all kinds of hoops and red tape and deal with all kinds of difficulties without wanting to provide the service that you need. So if you're well educated and articulate and able to describe what it means to you to have a qualified interpreter and what in fact that means, that's a very important skill to have. Module 5 talks about interpretive services using video technology. And I will talk more about that in an upcoming slide. Module 6 talks about preparing for self-advocacy. For example, if you know about the interpreter's role and how to work with an interpreter and you've got an idea about self-advocacy, how do you apply this? How do I go out in the world and actually ask for the kind of interpreting services I need? How do I ask my doctor or my boss to provide me an interpreter when I need one? What's an appropriate approach to do that? And we work with teaching people how to do that. Some people will have a frustrating experience and say, fine, that's it. I can't do this. It'll never happen for me. We want to talk with people about how to get past that, how to approach this challenge with a positive attitude, and make sure that they do get access to the services that they have a right to. The final module, number 7. Of course, you realize that each state has its own resources, independent living centers, disability law centers. A lot of deaf people are not aware of these valuable resources. Students in transition, high school seniors about to graduate, are largely unaware about vocational rehabilitation. Often encourage them to become clients of vocational rehabilitation, to talk about job readiness or possible college education. It's not something that they're familiar with. So these kinds of resources are crucial. We have to make sure that people know where they can go to get help. Going through all kinds of frustration without having appropriate resources is not necessary.
Now I'm going to talk specifically about the video that are included. The interpreter can read this slide first. It says new vignettes, comes with a play all option, an ADA overview by Howard Rosenblum, the CEO of NAD, combined vignettes from modules 1 and 2, explaining high-speed internet, the history of telecommunications, and demonstrations of the difference between VRS and VRI, automated telephone systems, and video etiquette. So we have maintained some of the video from the first edition, but we've also added some other ones. One really positive change in the second edition is that the video is embedded in the PowerPoint. Previously, you'd have to keep the PowerPoint open, then close it, then change to the video to play that for your group of participants, then go back to the PowerPoint. It's much less cumbersome now because the video is actually embedded in the PowerPoint. So the trainer can just press play, essentially, in the process of teaching. We've also added this ADA piece. There used to be a mention of it in the first edition, but there was no video explaining it. And I really have to thank and acknowledge PepNet for creating a video that they allowed us to include in this training, because it has a lot of very rich and specific information about the ADA, and it's explained in a very accessible format. So I highly recommend that you watch that video. There's very rich information, particularly about Title I and Title II. And the last 3 bullets, you'll see, as I mentioned, relate to the VRS and VRI module, number 5. Now, some people may feel like you really have to explain the history of telecommunications and about high-speed internet and the difference between VRS and VRI. These may seem like things for people who are more experienced that are not really barriers, but that's not the case. Suppose you've got somebody looking for a job, and they ask for a video phone to be set in their office. Now, oftentimes, the boss will feel like will have concerns about the cost of setting up something like that technology. If the consumer or the participant from the training is already savvy about high-speed internet, they'll be able to ask, do we already have high-speed internet, right? And the boss, of course, will say yes, and then they can ask about what about the bandwidth? What's our speed look like? So really, being savvy enough about the technology allows them to be confident in their negotiations with higher-ups. Because in actually what they will already know if they've taken the training that, for example, the video phone is provided for free from VRS companies and that they will install it and train you to use it for free, whereas the administration will be concerned about expense, about the concern for interpreters, etc. Whereas if the participant has had this kind of training, they'll know much more about what resources are available and low-cost options for providing that access. So they become more aware of what's available and then train others in their environment, as well as reduce concerns of administrators. Now, automatic phone systems are a fairly recent addition to our culture, and a lot of deaf people haven't had a lot of exposure to that. You know, when you call to make reservations, for example, and they say, if you know your party's extension number, please press 1. If you don't know, press 2, or wait for an operator. So I don't know, so I press 2, and then we get to another list of press 1, press 2, press 3, press 4. I mean, you have to feel for VRS interpreters as they're going through that. But it helps create for the participants some sensitivity to what VRS interpreters are working with, but also helps them prepare for these kind of telephone calls. For example, checking, do they have all the information they need before they make the phone call? Do they know the name of the contact person? Do they have the extension? Do they have the birth date or Social Security with them, Social Security number with them, so that the call can go smoothly? And those kind of automated systems can be incredibly frustrating to navigate if you don't have much experience. So we have found that to be a valuable thing to train people about, because it not only makes the process go more smoothly for everyone concerned, but it also reduces frustration on the part of the client. Now, I would like to show you the video that we've got. I'll give you an example. This slide describes Module 5 and distinguishes between video remote interpreting services as opposed to video relay services. During Module 5, students will not only learn from it being taught specific things, but will also learn to apply some of these skills in live settings. This is an example of a video that's used in the training. Now, this one includes quite a bit of humor, but I think you'll get the point as we play it. Kathy is moving to the videotape, so just bear with us for one moment, please. Have you ever noticed that talking with someone on video is not the same
as talking with someone
in person?
A long conversation on video
puts a strain on our eyes. Imagine what our interpreters
go through when they provide
VRS for several
hours.
How can we make it easier for our interpreters?
Here
are some tips from Pinky, our VRS ambassador.
We'll give suggestions on how to make
Pinky will give suggestions on how to make this experience more successful.
I'm calling a friend.
So,
that would be
I'm calling this friend. 808-220-1049.
Oh, I'm sorry,
whoa,
ma'am.
whoa,
That's
wait a minute. You got to slow down.
I'm going too fast. I need to slow
fast?
down.
Oh, all right, fine. I'll do it again.
I'll do it again.
808-220-1049.
0149. Oh, that's still way too
sorry,
fast
you're
for me to
still
catch.
too fast.
If you wouldn't mind repeating yourself
more slowly.
Slowly.
Fine.
8
0
0
8
1 2
2
No, ma'am.
I'm sorry.
No,
ma'am. I didn't mean
slowly.
extremely slowly. Wait, what am I supposed to do?
What am I supposed to do?
If I might offer a suggestion, if we could separate the number into 3 parts, the first with 3, the second with 3,
with 4 numbers.
and the last
group of
4
numbers
numbers
helps us
together.
identify the area
The first
code.
group of numbers
The
helps
second
us
would be 3 numbers, and the last
identify
4.
the area code. The second is
wouldn't
grouped
mind
more
grouping
easily
those
that
that
way,
way,
and the
please.
third more easily. Okay, 3 parts.
3 parts.
Alrighty.
808 220 1049. That's very clear.
Oh, that is
Easy to
clearer
do
and
as well.
easier.
I'll
Wow,
separate
that's
those
great.
from now
I'll do
on.
that from
Great.
now on.
So I actually, I need to
So
meet
I
my
actually
friend
need to meet my
MR.
friend MR.
If you wouldn't mind, please covering up.
Would you mind covering up a little bit,
Oh,
please?
what? Oh, okay.
Oh,
That's fine. I'll
yeah,
go
sure,
get something.
sure.
Hold
I'll
on.
get something. Hold
Thank
on.
you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, so
I
I
have to
actually
meet
have
my
to
friend
meet my
MR,
friend
and I
MR, and
realize you're eating, and
I
well,
realize you're
it's
eating,
distracting.
and
It's
well,
making me
it's
want your food
distracting, and it's
myself.
making me want your food
If you
myself.
wouldn't mind
If
putting
you
that to
wouldn't
the
mind
side
putting
for
that to the
later,
side
so
for
that we
later,
may
so that we can
interact.
actually talk, so
You
we
want
can
my
talk,
food?
right?
Okay,
You want my
that's fine.
food?
I'll put it to the side. Thank you. Okay, so I want to meet my friend MR over there. Oh, he's MR. I actually don't know who MR is, so that I might voice that. Could you fingerspell that? Oh, her name is Mary Rose. Yes, her sign name is MR. Mary Rose. Great, thank you. I'm going to bring my vehicle to your house and park it over there. Is that okay? Is it a motorcycle? Well, where is over there specifically? Do you want to park it by the house, behind it, or on top of something? I'm not sure. If you wouldn't mind making that clear for me so that I can communicate that to the person you're calling. Okay, so it's my friend's house, and I would be bringing my motorcycle and not parking it in the front, but parking in the back so that no one can actually see it. And I'm asking them if that's okay. So you need to be able to bring your motorcycle to the person's house and park it behind their house. Great. Thank you. I have been waiting and waiting for VRS forever. You're in the restroom? Finally. Excuse me, it's very hard to focus in on your signs, and actually you're signing with just one hand? You don't understand my signs with just one hand? Of course you can understand me. It's fine. It's no big deal. You can understand me. If you wouldn't mind finding somewhere to sit your phone down, then I can see your signs clearly. Please. Fine. I'll flip it around. Oh. Weren't those videos silly? They raise several good points, though. Those tips were collected through a survey of VRS interpreters about what they would like to see from deaf callers, helping them to do a better job providing effective, comfortable, good quality service. I'm curious, do you have any other ideas or tips on proper VRS etiquette? Let's discuss.
So there's an example of the kind of video that would be embedded. We have a number of different video examples that will provide fodder for discussion with the participant group after viewing. I hope you enjoyed that video. We wanted to show you a little bit of what it would look like in the training. And that one, again, is embedded in Module 5. Briefly, I wanted to show you what's included in the curriculum package. You'll see these listed, but the trainer discs 1 and 2 and student discs 2 and 3. The train the trainer, master trainer folks, get everything, all of the information. When you actually provide the training to consumers, the students get to bring home the 2 student DVDs for their own work. So those, again, are additional long-term resources for your participants. If you have interest and would like to request a curriculum package, please look online. You will see the URL listed shortly, and we can send you the package almost immediately. Now we have the second edition completed, and then we will be changing focus to work with the deafblind community specifically. We've been working with some wonderful deafblind consultants who are informing us about the kind of data collection that we did initially. We're working now on an FYI box. There are group sessions that have been recorded and are specifically being edited to work for deafblind participants in their own self-advocacy. These materials will also be produced in a number of formats, including Braille and large print, and that's specifically to meet the needs of deafblind folks. Right now we have about 10 deafblind people working with us from all over the country, and each region center has chosen a couple of folks. We will gather together in one place, and then we will have a critical mass of master trainers to work with deafblind populations. Hopefully folks will gather together for this training and then go back and disseminate the information in their home areas. If there are folks or areas that you'd like us to be in contact with where you feel like these would be useful training materials, please be in touch with us. And that's true for both deaf folks and deafblind people. Now you'll see the website is listed here, www.deafselfadvocacy.org. That website should be completely updated within the next 2 weeks. There's a frequently asked questions section of this website that's all provided in ASL. There are downloadable materials. And if you're looking for a trainer that's near to your area, you can also find their contact information on the same website. So I'm sorry that our time is running out. I guess we have time for, what, 1 or 2 questions, do you think, Kathy?
This is Kathy Kogan, and I guess we will open the floor for 1 or 2 questions from the group. So if anyone does have a question, please type them into the chat box now. The first question is, how much does the training package cost?
The training package itself is provided for free. The cost of reproduction would be your own. These are your tax dollars at work. So we've developed these curricula for folks to use. We send the original package, and then, again, the price of copying and printing would be on your own.
This is Kathy again. I'm not seeing any other questions, but you should feel free. We'll show you some contact email addresses in the next slides, and you can feel free to email questions to us. So for more information, here's a Gmail address that you can write to, deafselfadvocacy@gmail.com. If you go to the deafselfadvocacy.org website or interpretereducation.org, you can order the package. You can also order the package by emailing that Gmail account, deafselfadvocacy@gmail.com. And the information is available to anyone who wishes to order it. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and I would particularly like to thank the NCRTM, the National Clearinghouse of Rehabilitation Training Materials, for their collaboration on today's webinar. Jesse Jew, the instructional designer who gets us prepared to do these webinars each time. Carol Timmons, our captioner. I'd also like to thank Melissa Foster and Wendy Watson, our Boston-based interpreters. And I'd like to thank the Regional Interpreter Education Center at Northeastern University for collaborating with the National Interpreter Education Center to sponsor today's workshop. And the Regional Interpreter Education Center at Northeastern University is also sponsoring CEUs for interpreters, and the New England TASTE Center is handling CRC sponsorship for us today. Thank you so much. Please join us for our next webinar next month, February 11th, 2013, which will be on the Mentoring Toolkit that supplies myriad resources to support effective mentorship. That will be February 11th, 2013, from 3:30 to 4:30. If you have any questions about this, please contact niec@neu.edu. And here's our National Consortium of Interpreter Education Centers website, interpretereducation.org. Please come see us. I'm sorry that we couldn't get to the rest of your questions and comments today, but we really appreciate your participation. And again, feel free to contact us through some of these websites and email addresses. Now we'll move on to the evaluation. When you exit, you will automatically get to the evaluation and the verification of attendance and CEU applications. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.